Okay, we go to our final session here on stage one here at FinTech LIVE London 2024. This is the Women in FinTech panel, and we've got a fantastic breadth of experience joining me on stage today. Joining me is Lizelle Pratt, co-founder and chief growth officer at Capitalixe Payments and Banking Solutions. Also rejoining us, joined me for a fireside chat earlier, Jackie Kingham, director of business transformation at Raisin. Mazadora Jorgensen, Chief Impact Officer at Worldwide Generation. Also with me, Louise Beaumont, Senior Vice President at Mastercard. And Katie Evans, Chief Business Development Officer at Swarm. A warm welcome to our panel, please. Okay, I'll take on the elephant at the room first, the fact that the moderator for the Women in FinTech panel is an increasingly middle-aged white man. So I apologise for that in advance. I can't do much to
I think it should be that way around, though, because so many times you see women moderating an all-male panel. So it's nice to have it this way around.
Well, thank you very much. I feel supported. Thank you. Right, let's move on to your individual journeys. What I find fascinating here, as I've said on a couple of occasions, is everyone has a story. I'm sure none of you went into your careers advice sessions at high school and said, I want to be doing exactly what I am doing now. So let's look at those individual journeys. Lizelle, we'll start with you first. What inspired you to get into a career in FinTech, and what's your journey been so far?
Yeah. It's working. Okay, great. So my journey in the FinTech industry was pretty unconventional. So I didn't actually go to university, and I started working in the industry at just 18 at a compliance consulting firm. And then at 19, I landed my first job in the industry. Actually, my first manager is just here. I say hi, Kareem. And he gave me my first chance in the industry. And from there, I've been in the industry since I was in finance since I was 18. I'm 28 now, so almost 10 years, which is crazy to think that. I've come a long way. And so at 23, I decided to start my own business because I spotted a gap in the market to serve the underserviced industries. I was often underestimated very much by my colleagues during my time in the city. They often told me that women didn't belong here, that we should either be ironing clothes or being in the kitchen, which I found crazy. But because of this, I let the results speak for themselves. And from there, it's enabled me to land positions and accolades such as the Forbes 30 Under 30 finance list. I've also been featured in the Women in FinTech Power list as well, Tech Rounds 29 Under 29. And as of this year, FinTech Businesswoman of the Year as well.
And it's good to shout about such things. Absolutely. Congratulations on that. Jackie, if I can move down, your story, your background.
Yeah, so my background is I started as a management consultant. So I've worked at KPMG, EY, and a boutique consulting firm. And then I moved into the banking industry. So I've spent my last role, I was at a global investment bank for 9.5 years. I worked in a number of different areas, predominantly in group treasury, balance sheet management, liquidity management, and doing a lot of regulatory change program work. I'm sort of new to the FinTech space, so I just joined my current company, Raisin, which is a savings marketplace. So I've only been there since June, so I'm a relatively newcomer in the FinTech space, but been working in the financial services industry for a little over 15 years now.
And I'm relatively new to the FinTech industry, though I've got a really long career in the tech industry. So my background is very much in the technology industry, particularly big tech. Worked for lots of people like Microsoft, Oracle, Salesforce, and moved my career into a direction around sustainability. Was leading sustainability for Microsoft in the UK up until I joined Worldwide Generation. So the crossover really being the connection that's between technology, the innovation that we all need to see, the transformation that we all need to go through, and then how that overlays with sustainability. And now working for Worldwide Generation, which is a sustainability fintech business. We're growing globally across the world now, But really, what we're building is a data, finance, and solutions exchange for sustainable transformation. So a lot of experience coming up through the line from technology, and we'll share some of the insights that I've had, which overlay into FinTech as well.
Louise?
I was running a highly successful, very profitable consulting business, and nobody would lend to me. I had 10 or 12 of the world's biggest blue chip companies as my customers, and I needed money to finance growth, and nobody would lend to me. And I thought, that is a gap in the marketplace. I will found a business that lends to companies like mine, really good, well-run businesses. There are lots out there that the banks just seemingly couldn't lend to. Not just that they wouldn't, they actually fundamentally couldn't do it. So I founded a FinTech to target that. And then I sold my FinTech to my VC after a couple of rounds of investment. They wanted to build a FinTech portfolio. So I worked for the VC firm investing into FinTechs in the US, the UK, Europe, the UK, just to really, Africa, just to really start to understand how that global perspective on the FinTech world. Then I moved into advisory work, and then I became a grown-up, and I went to work for Mastercard. But I don't want you to hold that, that adulthood against me. Although I am currently at Mastercard, I am FinTech at heart.
Yes, being a grown-up catches up on all of us at some point.
Yeah.
For me, not quite yet, but we're working on it. Katie?
I definitely feel like a child in comparison to your experience.
I think she just made me sound old, right? Thank you.
You're so welcome. No, I actually started off life in the fashion world, doing PR. I mean, my life was like an episode out of AbFab. It was fantastic. But then I very much felt like my brain was not being utilized enough. So I decided to pick one of the most difficult and complex markets, financial market structures to go into, and that was metals trading. So I worked on very much an institutional commodities trading floor. The last one in the world, actually, where they sort of shout at each other face to face. So then my life became Wolf of Wall Street.
Yeah.
Then I was headhunted to go and work for a FinTech company called eToro during one of its craziest scale-up periods. And trust me, I don't know if anyone's worked for an Israeli company during a major scale-up sort of exhibition, but it is mental. I mean, I didn't sleep for 3 years. And then I decided to make my life really difficult, and I moved into decentralized finance about 3 years ago. So now I work with a load of crypto bros. So now my life is a little bit like Wolf of All Streets, which is like Crypto Kitty and cat memes. So yeah, it's been varied.
I do see a theme there of making life difficult for yourself.
Yeah.
Anyway, we'll move on. Let's look at some of the biggest challenges that are facing women in the FinTech industry. I could ask you, is it where it should be? No. Has there been progress? Yes. Has there been enough? No. So we've done those questions. Let's move on to those challenges and how we solve some of them. Katie, we'll start with you on this one. For you, how do you see those challenges of women working in FinTech? And for you, how can some of those be overcome?
For me, it's more about sort of perception of the industry. So, for example, like my job title is incredibly long, Chief Business Development and Communications Officer. That's because I started off as a PR, global head of PR. But I would find myself at many events like this having business development conversations with people, and they would turn around and say, oh, you know a lot for a PR person, which felt like a backhanded compliment, quite honestly, because why wouldn't PRs know a lot about an industry? So I think people need to check themselves, I think, when they think about, okay, well, who traditionally fills this kind of role? And why wouldn't they have a seat at the table because of this? That's one of the things. I think with the crypto industry specifically as well, we have a huge challenge with a global perception, mainly fueled by crypto Twitter, for example, and all the memes that come out of the industry, that there's this huge crypto bro culture and that there are no women in there, and that seriously devalues the contribution that women actually make to the crypto and DeFi sector at large. Serious contribution as well, some incredible minds in the industry. So for the crypto industry specifically, it's more around a challenge of perception, and that knowing that there's far more women in there than you think.
I'll throw that open to the rest of the panel, whoever wants to take that. The biggest challenges and how we look to overcome them.
There's some good research from Cambridge on this. They published it fairly recently, and they describe it as the triple whammy, the triple glass ceiling. They talk about there being a sort of Venn diagram where fintech is at the center of finance, technology, and entrepreneurship. And if you want to make life hard for yourself as a woman, you go right for the middle bit, which is fintech. And I thought there were some quite interesting stats about this. And I thought my own journey was around that one of entrepreneurship, being that female founder. There's a little bit of good news. The proportion of money that women raise now is twice what it was 2 years ago. It's now 2% of all the money that's available. Previously, the maths whiz amongst you will work out that it was 1%. That's from the World Economic Forum, and I do think they can count. And then you've got to ask yourself, so why? Why is it so hard to invest in female founders in fintech? And the answer is because VCs don't seem to really like female-run businesses, female-founded businesses. So you ask yourself why. Keep asking, like an annoying child, keep asking the question why. And you get to the point of, oh, well, do they like female VCs? And the answer is not really. 16% of partners in VC firms in Europe are women, 16, 1/6. And only 30% of investment committee members are women. So I think sometimes if you want to solve a problem here, you need to go back a few steps to the adjacent industries and start thinking about how you solve those. The good news is the numbers of women in those VC firms is increasing because they're starting to realize, and a female VC that I know said to me, I love investing in female-founded businesses because they're cheap. Right? Why are they cheap? They're cheap because the men aren't investing in them. So she can get in at what she regards as a good price. So if there are any VCs listening or in any way connected to this conference, just understand you are more likely to get a good deal on a female-founded business because the rest of your male colleagues are not competing to invest in that business.
Isn't that a really sad message, though?
It is, especially...
It's really sad.
Well, especially because...
It's not a message, it's a truth. It's a fact. It's what it is. So then you have to think about how do you exploit that. And I exploited it, and many other women will have done the same thing, by having male co-founders. You want to invest in a bloke? Let me show you a bloke.
Yeah.
Right? And then if you feel more comfortable investing in them, great. I will exploit your weakness.
But especially because the statistics around having women on boards within the executive committee, all the way through an organisation, that it is stark. Those businesses do better overall than organisations who don't. So it's not a question of having to have the evidence that shows by investing in inequality and diversity and time to really look at that from a intentional way, because it means that organisations will have more impact, be better run, more profit, etc., etc. The worrying thing particularly, and there was a report that came out by Pipeline, I think it was last week, that showed the FTSE 350 have actually reversed now on the number of women at exec committee level for the first time in 8 years. So exactly. So there's still a lot of work to be done for ensuring that we're really being intentional about having people from lots of different backgrounds across businesses, because ultimately it is better for us all if it is.
I just wanted to add here as well that I think where we're really going to see a lot of difference is educating the younger generation, right? Because it's so much easier to change a young person's perspective on the world, on diversity and inclusion, on equality, than it is to change a 50-year-old person's mind, right? So getting them in young. So what I've been doing a lot this year is speaking at schools. So I spoke at Haberdasher's Boys' School earlier this year, and I spoke about my journey and equality and diversity and things like that. And I also spoke at Warwick University, and last week I also spoke at King's College. So getting them educated on the importance of diversity and inclusion, the opportunities in the industry, why having a diverse boardroom is going to create a more profitable business, because the proof is there. Diversity is not just a nice to have. It's, if you want to have a successful business, then diversity is the way forward, because there's so many statistics. I'm sure you ladies have seen as well that companies with a more diverse boardroom outperform those that have just men on their board. And companies with a diverse team also outperform those that don't. So the proof is there. It's not just a nice to have at the end of the day. It's if you want to outcompete people and the other companies, and this is the way to go.
I think that point on education, though, goes one step further in saying that it's the way we actually treat people once we get into the workplace as well. I personally, I can't speak for everyone else on this panel, but some of the biggest champions of my career to date have been men. And actually, some of the biggest issues I've had with my career have been due to women and the way that women have treated me. I think, again, from personal experience, I was always aware of sort of the higher echelons of female management had it a lot worse than, say, someone of my age. And I completely respect and agree with that. But I don't think that means, in turn, that you should make the younger generation's life more difficult as a result. If anything, it should be saying, we've paved the way, we've had it more difficult, let me make life easier for you, and you be the symbol of my sort of plight, if anything, or the things that I've had to do to get here.
But that's what decent leaders do, right? Decent leaders make things better for those who follow them. Yeah. And if anybody ever says to you, how do I spot a great leader? And they'll start to give you a list of, attributes of that individual. It's this thing, or it's that thing, or it's the other thing. There is only one way you can spot a great leader. Only one. And the answer to that is followers. They've got some, right? And they're not pressed men. They're not scared. They're not fearful. They're not doing it because they've been told to. They're actually following because that person is great and they know it. So those people, both men and women, who make things better for those who come after them, who make things better for those who follow them, both literally and metaphorically, are the ones that we should seek out, are the ones that we should want to work with and for. Because that way, in a heterogeneous way, with lots of those great skills, we make things better for the company, and better, if we can really get to brains to think this big, better for the economy within which we work. And it should be a competitive strength of any country that can make it so.
Jackie, if I just bring you in on the challenges question finally, and then we'll move on. For you, the biggest challenges you've seen and how we overcome them.
I think some of the biggest challenges that I see are there are a lot of initiatives out there, and I'll pick on Innovate UK because that one, if some of you had seen it, was generated quite a lot of social media attention. So there are great government initiatives where we say we are going to set aside this money pot for fintechs and female entrepreneurs. And the situation that happened with Innovate UK is they had set aside 4 million and they were going to dish out 75k grants to female founders. After a period, they decided that they were only going to dish out half of the funding that they had available and they were going to stop the program. I'm guessing, maybe thinking nobody was going to notice. People noticed. There was a lot going on. My LinkedIn feed was just Innovate UK, what's going on? So much so that they had to release a statement and reverse their decisions and put their hands up and say, we made a mistake. Yes, we said we were going to commit £4 million to do this. And now we are actually going to do what we said we're going to do and commit the money. So I think there are a lot of great initiatives, a lot of great ideas, a lot of great kind of forums, but are we doing what we said we were going to do? And I think for me, that's the biggest issue. I think people mean well, but are you actually putting your money where your mouth is?
Speaking of meaning well, and this is a question I always like to explore as a man in this scenario, and I know personally through my career I've put a lot of time into helping maybe female employees explore management opportunities, look to step up, maybe explore things they've not thought they were capable of doing or thought they were placed to do. What advice would you give to male allies, if you want to call that, to be part of the solution, to help improve things? What would your advice be on all of that? And I'll start. Louise, can we start with you?
Yeah, this is an interesting one, right? Because it goes slightly against what I was just saying about it's great leaders, find great leaders, because great leaders will recognise greatness in those who follow them, regardless of their, how they're packaged, male, female, whatever. But I think there's one of the things that you need to do is really demonstrate that you are confident enough in your hiring ability to have long lists and short lists where you have beaten HR and recruitment agencies into a minor state of shock by demanding that there is balance in those long lists and short lists. Because HR departments find it annoying that they've got to go and get you a balanced short list or a balanced long list. And recruitment agencies hate it because they're constantly recycling the same people. So there'll be lots of protesting, there'll be lots of grumbling, but you just have to say, I want to see a balanced list. And it doesn't matter how particular you think the job is. It might be a cybersecurity job where you've only ever seen men. Well, trust me, there are women in cybersecurity, right? At the deepest engineer level. So just force that through. Just hold the line, say, I see you sent me a list. Doesn't look very balanced to me. I'll see you this time next week, or let me know if you don't have those people in your Rolodex, in which case I'll move agencies, right? So just hold the line on some of this stuff, and it forces people to see the problem, and it forces them to understand, actually, we've all got a role to play. Because there's always this thought that someone's going to fix this. There's always a they, right? They'll make this better, whoever they are, the faceless, nameless they. I think it's really, there's only two words here. It's I and it's we. I am going to fix this. We are going to fix this. There's no one else who's going to fix this. And just while I'm mid-rant, let me just tell you the thing that really annoys me. It's when a bloke says, well, I've got daughters. And I go, yeah, you also had a mum. You probably had sisters. You maybe had female cousins and aunts and loads of women in your life. You may even have worked with a few of us, but it only matters to you when it's the progeny of your loins, which turns out to be daughters, and you reckon you've got 18 to 20 years to fix this. You haven't. It's all of us, and it's now.
I've never been prouder as a father when I took my two children who are sort of early teens to look at a new high school. My son was particularly excited that you could pay for bacon sandwiches with a thumbprint. My daughter came away saying she wanted to be head girl. I was so proud that particular day. So I think I'm going to be fine there. Let's continue that question along about sort of the male role in this and being allies. Ms. Dora, can we come to you on that next, please?
Yes, look, I think there's something very practical as leaders that we can all do, which is sponsorship within our organisation. Now, sponsorship is different from mentoring people. Mentoring is help and guidance and advice. Sponsorship is more hands-on. It's about being the voice at the table when somebody isn't there, to be able to advocate for and support when opportunities are being discussed, career opportunities or whatever they are. So I think that's more of a investment in talent coming up through the line, in being intentional in ensuring that those opportunities are being offered around and spread to those coming up the line. So there are that's going to take some work, because that's an ongoing relationship. That's something where there's a two-way discussion that needs to happen. So that's something that we can all do today, is think about who we can be sponsoring in terms of succession planning and talent development within our own organisation. And then as individuals, to find a sponsor to do that for us. And I've been very lucky in my career. I've had many sponsors for different opportunities that have come up. But it really is about being intentional to think about the route that we want to take and who can help us on the way to do that, again, being a two-way street.
I've got an easy answer and a hard answer. Which one would you like first?
Can I have the hard answer, please?
You must. Okay, this is a bit of a step change from what we've discussed so far, but let's address the elephant in the room. Women have to battle with or balance between having a career and potentially having children. I think if there was greater focus on encouraging men to take as much paternity leave as women take maternity leave, we would see much more equity in the system of just general hiring practices. When I'm faced with two candidates and there's a potential that both of them of the same age, there's a risk of both of them taking off just as much time, maybe slightly less depending on, because of physiological and everything. But if there is that real blatant truth there sat in front of you saying, well, both of these people could go off at any point because they're at childbearing age, then I think it kind of levels the score a little bit for when we're looking at hiring practices.
That is so true. That is so true. And I see it in Mastercard because the men of child rearing age do take paternity leave. They absolutely do. And I absolutely see it in another. I have another life. I founded.
You work in FinTech. How can you have another
I
life?
have several. But my other life is about 6 years ago. I founded a podcast company. And so it's creative people, age range skews younger. And those are the conversations we have when we're looking to bring somebody on for a role. It doesn't matter whether you're looking at hiring a woman for a role or looking for hiring for a man for a role. We know that it's not, don't just go for the man because he's not going to have to. It's absolutely part of the conversation in a way that I haven't seen it be a conversation in more established businesses. And I haven't seen it be so overtly considered in the FinTech industry. So I think it's a useful one.
There's
Equal
also,
opportunities, maternity, paternity leave.
There's also an onus on that thread from employers not to be punitive if men take off as much time as women.
Yeah.
Because I've seen it, this was back when I was more in traditional finance, there were certain men who did take a few months off and they were passed up for promotion, or they believed they got a lower bonus. Actually, the guy I know wasn't very good at his job, so I think that's why he didn't get a good bonus. But there needs to be a culture within those workplaces that men shouldn't be scared of taking that time off because it's seen as being punitive if they do. Oh, and do you want my easy version?
If it's relatively quick.
Yes. I think if men, there needs to be greater female participation on things like panels and at events. So if men are given the opportunity to be on panels, give it up to a woman in your office, in your organization that might not have the confidence. You could do like a brain download with them, give them some key points to share, and then it's about giving them the experience of going up on stage.
I actually could not agree with that more. I'm actually joining as a panellist now. Sometimes it is difficult to find the right female guest to join. You want diversity, but if we've gone to the market to find a speaker on something, and you know of an excellent alternative, we'd love to hear it. So I've joined as a panellist here. This is quite exciting. So if we can just pass that down. We're sticking to that being an ally and the role of men in this particular situation. Jackie, if we can come to you next.
Yeah, I've got a really simple one. And, you don't need to be a leader. Just think about it. To all the men that are in the room at the moment, when you're in a meeting with your colleagues and you're in a meeting with, some of your female colleagues, maybe just take a step back and, are they being able to get their message heard? Is their voice being heard? The most powerful thing that anyone has ever done for me is I worked very closely with this guy, and he pulled me aside one day and he goes, Jackie, I notice you always get cut off in meetings. People always speak on top of you. And he goes, why don't you ever try speak back? And I said, my personality, I'm not the kind to kind of re-interrupt someone back. So I'll let them kind of say their bit, but I'm a very reflective person. And he said, do you think it would be helpful if I called people out and I asked you what you thought or got your opinion on something? And I thought, oh, okay, no one's ever said this to me. I said, sure, yeah, let's try it out. And he would make an active step to say, call out not just me, but other women in the room who he noticed would get spoken over a lot and say, Jackie, what do you think? Or I think Jackie was trying to make a point. Do you want to just finish the point that you were saying? And I think that is the most powerful thing that someone has ever done for me. So, you know, if you're not necessarily a leader and you don't have the ability to influence masses of people, anyone in this room can do that and just take a step back in a meeting and, you know, look at, and it's not necessarily, you know, women as well. You know, there are lots of people, extroverts versus introverts. You know, is everyone able to contribute to the conversation and get their voice heard? And I think that's something that's really easy but can be really powerful.
Lizelle?
Amazing insights, ladies, and I completely agree with all of you. And just to add on to what you've all said, I think it's really important for men to show their support, not just in the workplace, but also outside of it. So showing up, for example, I have 2 colleagues here today who have came to listen to this talk, which means so much because there's a lot of people that have left the talk. And just being here, listening to what we have to say, listening to the advantages of diversity and inclusion just means so much. And it really just shows, rather than saying that you support it, it shows with action, right? Showing action towards support. And then there's so many other ways, right? Congratulating your colleagues on if they've done well, or advocating for them on LinkedIn. Just making it more like showing, rather than in silent, do it loud. That's how I would say that that's the best way to support someone, and that's how you can create great allyship. And then not only that, there's also great initiatives like Women in FinTech, Women in Payments. There's so many of these, and they're always looking for male allies and male mentors to join as well. It's not just for women, it's also for men, because we'd love to learn from men as well, and you guys have so much to teach us too. So, yeah.
We are rapidly running out of time, and I do want to go to the audience for any immediate questions. We have one there and one at the far side. So if we can keep this relatively short and sharp, I'll be very grateful.
Thank you so much. Thank you, ladies, and this is quite inspiring. Me as a man is still like... so my question is that there was an instance in my life, one of my clients was very agitated. So I sent a man to deal with that, and the man eventually found the mistakes that the client had in his team, and the client was even more agitated now. So the next time around, I sent a woman, and the client suddenly got happy. And when she came back and I asked, what did you do? And she said, nothing. I said, what do you mean nothing? And she says that nothing, they were agitated. I just sat in there and listened to them. So the ability of women to be generally more empathetic than men is, I think, a more important trait for positions of power and positions of authority in the leadership roles. That's why probably women are becoming more successful in board positions than men, because you may win the project, but you really need to win the client and the relationship. And then once you have the relationship, that's when... What do you guys have to say about that, the empathetic nature of women that is generally better than men in women?
I don't know, I'm not comfortable with those levels of generalization. I think it's a really good example, but I wouldn't generalize it to the entire kind of, half the species. What I would say is that you learn very quickly how to be in each situation. You don't come into every situation going, I'm going to be this way in every circumstance. You tend to think a little bit more about how am I going to be? What would be appropriate? What would be effective? How do I survive this encounter? So you might have that moment where you're just thinking about what's most likely to work in this one. Particularly, and I've worked at the rough end of IT services, particularly when you walk into that room and somebody does want to absolutely tell you all your delivery is terrible, the entire program's shocking, they want money back and all of that kind of stuff. You don't start a fight under those circumstances. You let them exhaust themselves, and then you come in with some logic. So I think maybe it's that moment of just really understanding, how do I want to play this? Because I'm going to take into account everything that's happening before I decide on my response.
Thank you, Louise. I'll go to a next question. We'll look to share the answers around. It was on the end. Thank you.
Hi. Just initially wanted to thank you all for coming on the panel and representing women in FinTech, and also to applaud you all on your journey so far and your successes. I don't think we had an applause earlier for it, and I wanted to point that out. But my question is targeted towards Louise. It was something that you said about the banks fundamentally couldn't invest into you. I wanted to understand what you meant by that, and also across the panel, if you are a business owner or anyone that's sort of acquired funding, what your personal experience was of that in the most briefest sentence, if you can.
So they weren't refusing, banks weren't refusing to lend me money because I was a woman. They were incapable of lending because their data, they never even looked at the data on my business, right? And so I work in something now which I'm really passionate about, which is called open banking. Catch me later to talk about that. But what it basically says is any consumer, any business owns the data that they create through their behavior and should be able to share that data with organizations which are better able to interpret it and provide services based on that data. Because if anybody had actually looked at the data inherent in my business, they'd have realized good lending risk, not bad lending risk. So it's about making sure that we are back in charge of our own data, and that can be used to power the services that then deliver value back to us, because I will then get that hyper-personalized, predictive, and preemptive service. So it was very much that. It wasn't discrimination.
Okay. Thank you very much for that question, and I'm afraid we are out of time. I want a hard stop to wrap things up. So for me, though, a final word from me is I've been hosting these events for 3 years, and I'd very much like to think by the end of my working career, having a Women in FinTech panel will seem slightly archaic. That's kind of my ambition in that sort of time. You hope that day won't be necessary.
I have a similar ambition, which is when I first started, I could buy all of the women in FinTech a drink and have change from 50 quid.
Wow.
Right? The good
This
news
London
is
prices,
now
or?
I can no longer do that.
It was just her.
Right? It's too expensive because there's too many of us. And so we're on a trajectory. Let's make sure that we continue that.
Absolutely. Well, a huge thank you to Lizelle, to Jackie, to Mercedora, to Louise, and to Katie. Thank you very much indeed.